exactly on 2 o'clock. Welcome. So today's the Environment Transport Overview Scrutiny Committee. Good to see you all. Full house. So welcome. I'd like to remind everybody present that the meeting is broadcast live via our YouTube and will be available for viewing after the meeting. Again, make sure you use the microphones properly, on and off, particularly off when you finish speaking, so it helps everybody else. So the first agenda item will be we need to change the deputy chair. Unfortunately, Paul, Dr. Bremner, has excitedly been more promotions at work, and it means he's very busy, so he's finding it difficult to attend as a deputy chair. So I think he's still on the committee, isn't he? Yes. He sends his apologies today, but he will. He can't be chair. So I would like to nominate the deputy chair to be Councillor Richards. Janice, you don't mind me calling you Janice. I've known you for a long time. I can remember one dinner I ate all your food, didn't I? Can I have a seconder, please? Chairman. Right. Would you like to come and join me and sit next to me? Because you are better looking than Paul. I'm sure he's smelling a lot nicer than he does as well. But there you go. It's perfume. I'm sorry. My apologies. It's having a go to bloke, you see. Thanks, Janice. Right. Thank you.
Do we have to vote on that?
Do we have to vote for everybody? Sorry, can I have all in favour? Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Brenda. Okay, thank you. All right. I propose the minutes of the last meeting are a fair reflection of the 5th of September. Can I confirm them and to be signed? Is everybody happy with that? Agreed. Thank you. Question time. I have received no question from members of the public. The next agenda item, we have a question standing order. We received 5 questions from Max Hunt from over there. You should have a copy. I have distributed as best as possible. There's a number of points there. Mr. Hunt, would you like to? You have?
Yes, thanks very much. I have some supplementaries on the first 4. And they are matters that, they're not of a local matter, but matters that concern everybody. And the first question, just to paraphrase, was about what priority we give to improving public transport, safe cycleways and attractive pedestrian routes when we apply for growth housing funds. And the answer I got, which is a long one, but the salient bit is, if public transport access, cycle provision, etc. are appropriate, we will build accordingly. Well, that isn't a priority. That's a statement of from high down to low, I think. And I just wondered, is the priority implied quite low when we apply for these funding opportunities as far as the active and public transport modes are concerned? Is it high or is it low?
Before you do, yeah.
Well, it's your question, actually.
Yeah, it is. We discussed this at briefing, basically, and one of the issues we've got is this national structure of how we pull funding down. They have certain rules and regulations that we have to follow to get that funding, and unfortunately, sometimes the national rules mean we have to pull funding down in a certain way. So if it is to alleviate traffic by building more roads, then they're the rules, and if we need to do that, we need to follow them to a certain degree, if that's your question.
Are they the rules?
Well, I gather from some of the funding this morning when we discussed, I gather, but Anne, can you confirm that?
I could just thank you, Chair, for that, and through you. I would just answer the question. Yes, it is a priority. As Mr. Hunt is aware, through our LTP, we clearly set out how we will support all modes of transport, including walking, cycling, public transport, etc. The answer in terms of specific funding streams does depend on the criteria around those. Many are about unlocking housing, for instance, so therefore that's how you tick the box to get the funding. And some, I think to be frank, some of the DFT's evaluation processes don't always work in favour of things like walking, cycling in public transport. Where the funding stream is for that, we will absolutely go for it, and we have been successful in the past with things like LSTF funding and Access Fund. In fact, we're still seeing the latter years of an Access Fund on the edge of Leicestershire, which was £3.2 million. And even where it isn't, we will do our best to include walking, cycling and public transport provision within those wider schemes. However, we are often constrained by the requirements of the funding streams.
Use your microphone, Max. Is it on? Yeah.
Moving on to the second question, supplementary on this. This is about the cycle of building sustainable urban extensions and at what point we consider climate change targets. The answer that I received is it's up to the local planning authority, but the local planning authority always includes the travel modes that we've mentioned. And I don't understand really the answer of what we do.
Okay, Max, I'll just come in a second. Just turn your microphone on. It's okay.
The point being is 20-year timescale to build.
I can give an example from yesterday. We had and some of the gentlemen attended the meeting yesterday, which was the Scrutiny Commission, where we've got a large development at Lutterworth, I think it is. And one of the main concerns was about the environment, Max, I've got to say, and logistics. Logistics was an issue for everybody there. We talked about the logistics where they put sheds, or everyone wants to put sheds and to put stuff in. Where do you locate them so it's environmentally more friendly? There's less trucks, there's less travel. We talked about sustainable housing, where we have housing that costs a few £100 a year to keep going. It's less, carbon free, no gas. All this is part of the development to build into cycleways so we can have healthy living. And I agree with you. That's the vision. The issue is still sometimes is the criteria that's laid down for certain funding makes that sometimes a little bit more difficult. But we are discussing it as a council, and and I think my gentleman from the Liberal side, we talked quite at length yesterday. Is that correct? Thank you.
With respect, and I do have great respect for you, as you know. I do. That's not really an answer to my supplementary question. It's more of a conversation which we regularly have. Can I go on to the third?
Yes.
This is about.
Sorry, Dan, would you like to answer as well? Sorry. She made more depth than I do. Off you go.
Just to add to what the Chair said then, we do have to respond as the highway authorities to planning applications when we're consulted, such as, these big sustainable urban extensions, according to the guidance coming out of government that we work to at this point in time. Now, and our own policies like our LTP, etc., which is what we do. Obviously, the climate change agenda has really accelerated over the last year or so, and as you're aware, this authority has made a climate commitment to reduce carbon, etc., and that was done in May this year. We are also, as part of that, reviewing our environment strategy, and that will begin to filter into anything different we need to do when we're responding to consultations such as large sustainable urban developments. One other factor that may be of interest to Mr. Hunt is we have been recently talking to the DFT about how they evaluate and assess modelling so they can bring carbon into that, because at the moment it isn't a factor that triggers any of their evaluations when it comes to assessing awarding funding. So I think probably the frustration is existing policies and guidance and practices are slower to change perhaps than maybe the public perception would want us to be, and we as individual officers indeed would want to be, but there's certainly a lot of activity happening to better reflect where this authority is and where the country is in terms of climate and carbon.
Back to you, Max.
Well, I think we're on question 3 now, which was about how we plan our transport network, and I'll move on because it's a very long answer, and to be honest, well, perhaps officers could confirm really that where we're planning our transport network, we wait for government to show us how we need to adapt in this 20, 30-year cycle. And my concern here is how we plan for the length of housing developments, 20 to 30 years. Even the A511 we're going to talk about shortly won't see the light of day for 2 or 3 years, assuming the funding is there. So already the planning that we're doing is way into the sort of targets that we are talking about from government at the moment, and I'm grateful for the lengthy reply. I think I'll leave it there.
Can I say that Max brings it up quite a lot at briefings here, and I think and I respect exactly what you're saying. And in a way, I do understand your concerns. A number of us do. It's just that we're part of a big machine. But I agree, we need to keep an eye on it. And I totally support a lot of the points you're bringing. It's just how we address it and how we can manage it in difficult times. But you know, you're a valuable part of Scrutiny, Max, and I think I really enjoy your comments, and may it continue. Blake.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add to the debate, I know we're responding to supplementary questions, but I agree. I think Max is a passionate campaigner for environmental protection. He wants to see this authority, like we all do, practice what we preach. We've declared a climate emergency, and we're in the business of putting proposals together to meet the targets that we are going to impose and set ourselves. The one thing I would say, which might just give a bit more additionality to the debate, is the Environment Bill, which is currently had its second reading in Parliament. It's due to go through its committee stages. That supposedly will be after the general election. But there's a huge swathe of measures that the government are bringing forward to really up our game nationally to address, the climate emergency that most of us have adopted. Just incidentally, I read somewhere the other day, Friends of the Earth have done, if you like, a climate assessment for each authority area within the country. And I'm sure I might be mistaken, but it said only 2 or 3 of the authorities within Leicestershire have adopted a climate emergency stance. So when we're talking about obligations on the planning authorities to enshrine within their own planning measures to be able to address the climate challenges we face, I think we really do need to probably look beyond what we're doing and think more holistically across Leicestershire, and in time rely on the measures within the Environment Bill and the Waste and Resources Strategy to guide us towards, if you like, an improved place. Thanks.
Thank you, Blake. I think we move on to the next agenda. Thank you. There's no items from the chairman, so I've got no urgent or notified urgent items. Declaration of interests, I don't think we've got any. Declarations of party whip, no, we have no declarations. No petitions have been presented, so we go straight on now to item 9 on the agenda. Just to inform everybody, on Monday we had a long site visit of the road, the 5011. It was a suggestion of Max that we do, and I'd just like to compliment Max's concept and idea. It was great. A number of members turned up on the bus. We spent quite a few hours stopping. It was very well mapped out, so I'd like to thank the staff that were on board were very informative. It was very transparent. We saw the good, the bad and the ugly, which was brilliant. It just puts into perspective what people have to travel each day and what we're trying to achieve. So once again, for all the members that attended, thank you very much. And I thought it was a very, very valuable trip. We have some comments for Dr. Einan, who the leader of the Labour group for the Leicestershire County Council. She attended the tour, and she's put some points down. So would the best way would be, Max, do you want to mention any of these points? Would you like to, as it's your leader? Or shall we go through to Ian? Ian, okay, let's go to Ian. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of the report you have before you today is to advise members of the Environment and Transport Overview Scrutiny Committee on the progress on the A511 Growth Corridor project and consult the committee on the proposal of the bid for £42 million major road network funding from the Department of Transport on the estimated £49 million proposal we're currently working up. But firstly, can I thank the members for taking the time to attend the area on Monday, and I'm glad they found it useful and very interesting. I've got to say, I think it was an excellent thing from the feedback I've had from the officers as well who were there. So we would be happy to arrange any future such meetings on matters that the committee members wish to go out and have a look at on schemes. It's a very large, complex scheme, so I think it was useful for everyone to see, as you said, the good, the bad and the ugly while it was out there. With large growth on the A511 corridor and predicted normal traffic growth as well, so housing growth and normal traffic growth, we have developed in 2008 a Colville transport strategy. And an outcome of this strategy was the introduction of a contribution strategy to enable developer contributions to be gained from all those developments in the area to contribute towards the impact they were having on the network. It has always, though, been recognised that government funding would also be required as well, as there is general growth in traffic in the area as well, and that can't be mitigated by any of the developer contributions per se. So we always knew it was going to be, we would have to be bidding. We've already delivered schemes in the area at Junction 22 of the M1, Junction 13 at the M42, as well as improvements for walking, cycling and bus in the area as part of local sustainable transport funding in the last few years as well. And we'll be tying into those as part of this scheme. Following the announcement of the major road network by the Department for Transport and their criteria for funding bids, it was apparent that due to the work we'd already done on the 511, this was the only scheme that would be ready in Leicestershire that would be able to go forward for bidding to enable construction in 2020 to 2025. There are many other routes in Leicestershire that we're looking at, but it was the only one that would be available to go forward. As such, we submitted a strategic outline business case in July 2019 via Midlands Connect, and ours was the only scheme in the East Midlands to go forward. And we have been successful. We now have to submit a outline business case in December 2019. So a lot of work is now happening. In addition, we also won £1.28 million towards the development costs, which complements the £4 million capital funding already agreed at Cabinet in March earlier this year for developing the scheme. In the report, and as many members have been out, I won't go into too much detail of the many junctions, but paragraphs 24 to 34 detail the process we've been undertaking to identify the various measures that will meet the funding criteria. And we've talked some already about funding criteria and what would fit. Also in Appendix C, you will see that we've given an overview of all the other measures we have considered or packaged that might fit the £50 million funding limit in that area for the various criteria for not only our own strategic outcomes, but Midlands Connects, the Department for Transport. And the package we put forward is the one that best meets the chance of success in that funding criteria. This basically comprises of 8 junctions, 1 small section of dualling and a new link road, known locally as the punch-through, and it's mentioned in Dr. Einen's letter, which I'll come on to at the end. Paragraph 35 to 46 details the consultation process currently that is now completed, and that took place from the 26th of September to the 23rd of October, and Appendix D has all of the main comments back there. Interestingly, there are 3 main themes on the comments coming back so far, which will help inform not only our development of the bid, but the design process. The first one being that the scheme should do more. Actually, a lot of the consultees wanted us to do more. There's a lot of talk about dualling the whole of the route. But unfortunately, as we can only bid up to £50 million, what was being asked for, we would not be able to do more as part of this funding criteria. Other suggestions was we should do more for walking and cycling, which we've also discussed here today. And interestingly enough, we've already started discussions with the Department for Transport, who actually came to us recently and said we should look at including more of those measures. And we've asked how they will be scored, and we're still waiting to hear back from them on what we can do. So anything further we can build into the design, we will be doing as well. But as I said, we have already spent 3.5 million on walking and cycling along the 511 corridor from the local Sustainable Transport Fund. So there around the junctions is where we couldn't complete, and that's where we'll be looking to do as part of this proposal. And finally, there was a lot of concern locally about some of the proposals to ban turns at the Broomleys and Flying Horse junctions. I can understand that concern from residents who may have to do different manoeuvres. However, having looked at the design of those junctions, in order to achieve what we can within the funding criteria, our only options seem to be at the moment, but we are testing the designs, is to ban those turns, not only to improve the congestion flow of traffic and improve both have air quality areas associated with them, but we would have to take an awful lot of land in order to build much bigger junctions to enable those smaller turns to still carry on. But we are looking at those comments back and how we can mitigate them. The next steps are to report the progress of the consultation and our progress to Cabinet, as well as this committee's comments on the 22nd of November. We hope to be in a position to submit the outline business case in December, and then we will continue to develop the full business case ready for submission in 2022. That will of course be all at our own risk, as we have had to do with other schemes as well. If successful, we would then hope to start later in 2022 the 8 junctions and the dualling and the punch through. There are a number of very, very difficult processes to go through, but we are working through those as we speak. If it's okay with yourself, Chair, if I can just pick up on the questions that Dr. Rynan has asked through. Sorry we haven't got a full response.
Just 2 seconds.
Yes.
I'd just like to say, if you do read this, it's very well written. It's very precise, and I think Terry's done a really good job on asking the question and the way she's worded it. So it's, I'm sure you can help answer some of the questions.
I'll say, having worked with Dr. Rynan for many years now on improving things in the Colville area, I recognise many of the points and actually quite welcome them as well. Unfortunately, we've not had time to go through and give a very comprehensive reply, as we only received this yesterday. But I will go through the italic questions that she said and just give you a small overview of the questions she wanted answering, just so members have a flavour of that. We will provide a full response back to Dr. Rynan and members of the committee in due course, if that's okay. Her first question was, I'd like to be assured that this part of the project is deliverable, and she's referring to the punch through, which I spoke about, mainly because it interacts with the railway line in the area. As officers, we know the lengthy timescales and the processes that have to be gone through to work near a railway line and compulsory purchase of properties and so forth. We have already started liaising with Network Rail. Officers have already been up to York to discuss their 102-week leading time for booking of railway lines, so we are already on that process, and we are already speaking to the landowners that we require and having good negotiations about acquiring the land, but we'll give more detail to Dr. Rynan on that. The next point was, it would be helpful if the committee could ask Highways to investigate the feasibility of an additional cycle link in the area. It doesn't actually form part of the major road network schemes and wouldn't form part. However, her suggestion for a cycle route on the disused railway line absolutely complements everything else we've done in the area. There is a Colville cycle strategy, and this will be added to it, and we will then look to see how we can deliver that either from developers or other funding that comes forward with partners. So a good suggestion there from Dr. Rynan. Dr. Rynan has also picked up on the no right turn Stevenson Way Broomleys Road junction, as I've mentioned. She said, can I be assured that this roundabout will have the capacity to cope with this traffic as well as the link road, because if people can't make manoeuvres, they will have to go to the next roundabout and come back. Part of the development of all of this scheme is we've been micro-sim modelling all of the junctions and the improvements to see the knock-on impact at every junction from the improvements at the others. All of the roundabouts do have the capacity to take the traffic way into the 2030s. That's what we've modelled to make sure they work. And the final one, would it be possible to harmonise the speed limits along the A511 to something less than the national speed limit to better manage driver expectations, traffic flow and residents' experience? We've had many years of discussions with people along here about the speed limits and what they are, and we always give an undertaking, and we do, to reassess speed limits as part of any redesign of the road network in that area. That is being done as part of this scheme as well, but we always like to manage the speed limits as per the national criteria, as it moves the traffic in the best possible way, not just what people think it might be. But we'll give a firmer response on that, because been asked for many times. That's all I have to say. Any questions, Chair?
Yeah, any questions? Oh.
There we go. I noticed on the tree scheme we're talking about, there's quite a bit of tree planting going ahead, or proposed to go ahead. I'm a bit concerned we're only planting deciduous trees. Now, they only are useful for 7 months of the year. If you plant coniferous trees, such as home oak, that reverses the process, that they actually grow in the winter, not the summer. So therefore you're increasing the air quality throughout the year rather than 7 months of the year. So can we look at that as being a bit of a process of using coniferous trees as well as deciduous trees? Well, there's quite a few actually. Go on then, first that one.
So very quickly, yes, we're always willing to take suggestions on planting. As members may be aware, we've just won an environmental award on the work we've been doing on the Melton Distributor Road for our planting schemes. But any improvements and suggestions, gratefully received.
Okay, so that's that one. Because it says in the report, native species. Well, home oak's not a native species. It came over in the 1700s, so it's not a native species, but it provides a useful purpose that other trees, native trees, don't produce other than holly. We move then to one of my subjects is the shared cycle path stroke pedestrian path. I am utterly opposed to shared cycle and pedestrian paths, especially with the increase in mobility scooters, because mobility scooters and pedestrians don't mix, and there's some quite powerful ones that are entitled to drive on the pavements now, apart from on the road. So I'm concerned about that, and I think there should be a demarcation line between pedestrians and cycle mobility scooters using these paths. Got an opportunity to do it here, new development, new highway widths. We can do something there with that one. Moving on. I think that'll do for now, Chair. If you forgive me, I might want to come back with some of the answers that we're going to be given.
Okay, thank you. Do you want an answer to the psychopath, or are you just
You're
making a statement?
I'd like an answer.
Thank you. We always appreciate any comments on the design, hence the consultation process, and we'll feed that into the design. Thank you.
You haven't got a motor scooter yet, Bill, have you? Still walk, all right? We have plenty in Melton, and we do have some issues as well. So they're very valuable, but also they can cause some issues as well of some problems. Any other questions? Max?
I'm just picking up on what Bill's made. It's about the changes in transport, isn't it? That we're with the electric bikes, scooters, and mobility scooters, and these are having a serious impact on the provisions that we're asked to make. And that was really my first question about the time scale and how future-proofed this is, because the development, presumably, which is going to fund some of this, will not be well, the question is, how soon do you expect, if the bid is successful, to start on site and finish on site and be paid for it, those components? I'll mention the other things whilst I've got the floor, as it were. The Flying Horse Roundabout is really about the link from Loughborough in that direction, because people commonly approach Colville via that roundabout. And she made a very good point in the paper about traffic diversing into, is it Brumley's Road? Anyway, it's the one that goes along the top of Colville. It's quite a nice road, which would be a very bad thing for the residents of that part of Colville. And I don't think we really have a solution for that, but it sounded as if the only solution was to widen the roundabout, which would put extra costs on. And the third point was, it occurred to me that when we were sitting in the long traffic delay along the road between Barden Quarry and Flying Horse, it was exceptional because of certain things which are happening that day that shouldn't have been happening that day. But it's usual for the congestion to be there, and that congestion, that number of vehicles using that roundabout will probably increase over the period that we're talking about. And it occurred to me that there was scope for a bus lane there, if not elsewhere in the scheme, if you're hoping to get express buses going from Colville to Leicester. That's prior to the building of or the completion of the National Forest line, if that ever happens. So it's about the time scale and how future-proof this is. Just a confirmation of what your solution, what the scope for the solutions of the Loughborough traffic is, and whether there might be a bus lane somewhere along the line.
Ian,
Thank you.
can you help a little bit there?
I can, Chair. The timescales, well, the developments are already happening in Colville. If you go out there now, they are building and delivering homes in that area. Sorry?
When you get the money.
Oh, right. We are already having triggers for the money come forward at the moment, but those have been spent already on the junction 22 of the M1 and junction 13 and the roundabout in Ashby. What we'll be looking at is, with the developments coming forward, with the County Council will either have to forward fund the remaining 7 million and then gain that back from the strategy, or we'll have the triggers in place by that time. We will also be looking to enter into a agreement with North West Leicestershire District Council, like we're doing with Melton, to share that risk as well in case those 106 contributions don't come forward. However, they have been with the big developments already in the area. Regarding the Loughborough traffic, the improvements we've been doing or modelling out have been based on the current traffic flows and what people do. It's mainly the side road junctions that won't be able to make the right turns in the area. So we're looking, and we know that's the main B road feed up to Loughborough, and it's also the motorway diversion route that's signed as well. So we are looking to take account of that. With regard to bus lanes, as it says in the report, when as part of the major road network, this was about easing congestion on the route, and that's what the Department of Transport were looking for their criteria. They hadn't had any scoring mechanism for bus in there. We're now talking to them about that to see what that might be. However, we are very limited in land in some of these areas, so can we fit in a bus route, can we not? You're right, the congestion in that area is only going to get worse, and I believe you had on Monday, you had a down to one lane, so you could see what a bus priority would look like. Where we get the big congestion already has air quality issues declared for the local residents. The main thrust of this scheme is about removing those stop-start movements and that congestion to ease the traffic through and alleviate the air quality. But all of that is being put into the design. Obviously, as has happened in many recent years, we are now on very accelerated programs with the government. We are looking to have building by 2020, late 2022 on site. And the reason for that is, and subject to change, if HS2 starts being built in Leicestershire by 2025, this will be one of the major routes that will be impacted or be used by the HS2. So part of our argument is about future-proofing it for that traffic as well. So we've really, at the moment, for what we know with HS2, if we're not finished by 2025, we could be kicked off anyway because we won't be able to come in and do anything on the 511 for several years.
Okay, thank you. Is that okay, Max?
Well, I'd just like to point out, we're not sure we're going to get, or whether £7 million is going to come from, and yet we want to be on site or completed by 2022, is that right? And previously we've got into a problem, certainly in the Loughborough scheme, the A512 scheme, where we were still negotiating when the contractors were waiting to come on site. So we're going to fall into that trap again.
No, I don't believe so. As I said, some of the developments have already started and we've already had the triggering of money. The Colville contribution strategy identifies from developments that are already in place with their triggers of £20 million worth of contributions. It will be for those contributions and triggers to come forward that will give us the money back. It's not like, say, in other areas where you're still waiting for the planning to go through. So I think there is more surety of that.
Okay, thank you. Is that all right, Max? Yeah, I think. Yeah. Just quite interesting to all the members here. Pat's was with us, and he'll be speaking a bit later. What was holding the delay was actually an illegal permit. Some building people hadn't applied for a permit and were blocking the road. And he's got the name and address and got the details. Well done. Secondly, if you know the route, there is that crossing from Barden, the quarry, and it's very slow. And the train came through, and it was just a single train from the back. So is actually, it was commented it could be quite dangerous because nobody was seeing at the front. It was just pushed through, took a long time. As a fire engine and I think a ambulance and police cars tried to get through, they were stopped. And then there was, I think Pat's already taken up as well, he's going to write to them. And also there's some issue about some ugly graffiti, which was awful, and we don't have to talk it here, but that's going to be taken up and to see if they could do some, because it looked awful. So the trip had some other benefits as well. Dan.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I'd like to welcome the report. I was very enthusiastically reading through it, having obviously know the situation there over many years and how the escalation with the development at that particular part of Colville. When we talk about the Birch Tree roundabout, independently, a person has shown me a study of that, and obviously it is absolutely terrible. It's one of the worst probably in Leicestershire for pollution. Added from the quarry, I presume that is one of the other elements there that's made it so bad. Concerns me because obviously we've built houses just down the road from it, actually, but it is very serious, and I'm pleased that we might be able to do something there, because the slope and the roundabout's configured, it's a little bit like this, so the trucks they're only moving slowly, but they have to put the foot down to be able to carry the load up, and they haven't got speed, so obviously they're generating all the sort of stuff that we don't particularly want. So anything we can do to make that better, it's got to be a good thing, and particularly further down, because there's going to be a new leisure centre built there. So obviously, you know, that roadway is going to get really, really very busy. I know they're sort of talking about another 2 years for completion, but I mean, obviously it's just another element that's going to create more congestion along that particular road. I'm also interested in knowing about the railway line, because obviously we as an authority, this is the Burton to Leicester or Leicester to Burton, it depends where you live, the definition of how you title it. But at the end of the day, it is important. I'm just wondering whether that, because in that particular note there was talking of a cycle down an old railway track. Now whether that's the old coal, that's something separate, okay, because that would be a phenomenal benefit for people. It would certainly take a lot of cars off the road if we did get this rail track to ever work. And I know that's probably a lot of ifs and buts at the moment, but we'll have to wait and see what this review and what our money and all these other councils have contributed, how it actually comes out. The people who are campaigning very hard for this have suggested that they used the wrong figures in the past and everything else. So I thought, well, as long as you're using the proper figures and you can justify it, it'll be very good. So I think it's excellent. Obviously, there's going to be bumps in the road, literally, as we go along this, because it always is that way. And obviously, once we're trying to dual parts and we're doing the different things, it's not going to be a nice place to travel up and down for X amount of months. But long term, it will have the real big benefit. But the punch through at the end is critical, because that roundabout is really seriously not good for people to live close to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dan. And I'm glad you brought up the leisure, because we stopped and looked where the leisure centre is going to be placed strategically. We were shown how they can minimise impact and how we can make sure people can get across the road. And it was really good. It was a great. Any other comments? And we move on. Blake.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted, as lead member, and it's something that I'll be saying at the Cabinet meeting as well, is to thank all of the 200 people that turned up to the events. There's been nearly 100 responses, I think 95 responses, and I thank people for taking the time to send in their responses, because that's what the consultation is all about. Clearly, there's a little bit more work to do to try and flesh out how we can persuade those members of the public that have taken an interest in this scheme that the scheme is acceptable to them. But I think it's worth pointing out that the scheme is necessary, and one of the, I think, the issues here is members of the public generally struggle to comprehend the cost of civil engineering. And whilst this is a £49 million scheme, I think the general feeling is much more needs to be done, and I personally would concur with that. But the fact that we're bidding for £49 million to try and make some improvements should go to the County Council's favour and credit. I'd also like to thank my support member, because I know he turned up to a few schemes, and indeed many of you would have turned up to some of the events. Councillor Bedford, who isn't actually here, Peter Bedford, he's lobbied me hard. He's explained the trouble with what's already been observed and talked about and debated this afternoon with the restriction on turning movements, particularly the Flying Horse roundabout. I concur. I'm all ears, and the issue we have here, and I've batted it back to the officers to see whether there are any alternative proposals, is that in order to get the same benefits out of the scheme, there perhaps is an alternative, but it would require millions of pounds more to fund, and that's the type of business case that simply would not be accepted by central government and the people we put the bids into. So we are between a rock and a hard place in terms of those specific aspects, but the scheme in general should only go to better this part of North West Leicestershire and the County Council. And I've heard the debate today, and I'll look forward to receiving those comments through to Cabinet when we take the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, thank you, Blake. And also refreshing was we saw the information and the feedback. Clearly, we saw that a number of residents were against the Flying Horse concept, and we saw it. It was transparent. That's what scrutiny is all about. We saw the good, the bad, and etc. As I said before. So very powerful stuff, and I think we're moving along, and it's. I think the work is good work, and we're working together as a team, and I think that's excellent. We'll go on to the next part of the agenda. Thank you. Agenda item 10. This is the, and this is to Anne, of course. We'll do the annual report. You've all got copies. Over to you, Anne.
Thank you, Chair. The first thing that I'll outline to committee that is changed this time with the annual report is normally the data is using comparative data from 27 county councils in total. Because of local government reorganisation in a number of authorities and a number of county councils moving to unitary authorities, that data set would decline. The decision has therefore been taken to add in county unitaries into the data set, which increases the number of comparator authorities to 33. The details of which authorities that is, if members are interested, are in paragraph 4 of the paper. Moving on to Appendix A, if I could just talk you through that and the highlights and the lowlights of that, if that's all right. Bear in mind, this is not the quarterly report, it is the annual report for the 18-19 financial year. So in Appendix A, under strategic transport, the first one there, average vehicle speeds during the weekday morning peak. You'll see there's been a slight decline, very slight decline in performance from 31.3 miles per hour to 31.1 in the last year. And we're in the third quartile in comparison to those other authorities. However, I'll just give you the context that when we looked at our 109 permanent traffic counters across the county, they show over the same time period a 2.9% increase in traffic growth. So while we've seen a slight fall in that speed, actually we've seen a background increase in traffic growth as well, just to give you that wider context. Satisfaction with traffic levels and congestion, again you'll see there's been a decline in that, 37.1 to 34.2, and we're in the second quartile on that one. The next one I won't dwell on because it hasn't been updated. The businesses citing concerns with traffic congestion, because that's a biannual survey. Moving on then, taking the next two indicators together, satisfaction with cycle routes and facilities and satisfaction with pavements and footpaths, both have declined over the year. However, we're again in both of those, we're in quartile 1 in comparison to those other authorities. Moving on to sustainable transport and road maintenance, the percentage of classified road network which requires structural maintenance, we have remained static at 2%, which is very good and extremely challenging, I think, in this day and age with our funding. And we are in the top quartile, and we continue to have some of the best maintained roads in the country. However, moving on to the next one, which is the similar indicator, but for the unclassified road network, what you'll see there is performance has declined from 12% requiring maintenance to now 15% requiring maintenance. We are still in the top quartile, but I think what I would caveat for you there, and bear in mind the unclassified road network is by far the largest percentage of a road network. Most of our road network is unclassified. Given our funding, our future funding settlements and what we're likely to have available for maintenance, I would very much predict that indicator will continue to decline over time. To just put that on your horizon there. But as I say, in terms of comparator authorities, we're in the top quartile in terms of the quality of our road surfaces. Moving to the next page, in terms of the network gritted, as you'll see, the amount of network we grit has risen just slightly from 45% to 47%. That's basically because when we reviewed our winter maintenance operation last year and just looked at the criteria again for which roads we should be gritting, we amalgamated, found all those little anomalies, etc., and we've clarified that it's now 47% of the network we actually go and grit every time we go out and grit there, which is relatively high compared to a lot of our neighbouring authorities. Overall satisfaction with the condition of highways. We are in the first quartile. However, you will see that we have declined 10 percentage points, which is quite substantial. What we'll say is we did look at the data across all the other authorities for this, and there has been the same trend across the board. Everybody's declined. It's no defence, it's not a good position, but interesting trends there in terms of public perception and satisfaction with condition of highways. Percentage of footpaths and other rights of way has remained static. In terms of number of bus journeys, and again, I'm sure you're familiar with this because the figures always have maintained and vary between 13 and 14 million passenger journeys per annum, and we're very much still in line with that, although we have declined slightly from the previous year, and we remain in the third quartile in comparison. In terms of, again, looking at the next two indicators, road safety, taking them together, total road casualties and then people killed or seriously injured, while both of those in declined in performance in terms of we've got more casualties and more people unfortunately killed and seriously injured, we are still performing very well in comparison to those other authorities being in the top quartile. I won't dwell on that because, as you know, you get an annual report in March which is very thorough in terms of the whys and wherefores and the activities supporting that work. Moving on to waste, total household waste per household waste per household in kilograms, we have seen an improvement in performance in terms of we have a reduction of kilograms of household waste. However, we do remain in the fourth quartile. There is, and I'm sure members will recall because we have had this discussion a lot, there is a link between prosperity and the amount of waste per household, and you could then say, because Leicestershire is a relatively prosperous county, that will have some kind of bearing in the amount of waste we're seeing for every household there. Percentage household waste sent by local authorities for reuse, recycling and composting has remained largely static. We are in the third quartile. Activity is ongoing, working with our district partners there. For instance, they now have a common list of the items that you can or can't recycle, which is obviously far more easier and understandable for the public, and there's ongoing communications, etc. So there is ongoing activity around that. Percentage of local authority collected waste landfill, again, we're not meeting our target, and we are in the fourth quartile. Again, each time we have a discussion on this, and members will be very familiar that under existing contractual arrangements, we don't anticipate seeing an improvement in this indicator until next year and the following years after that. Waste produced from LCC non-operational sites, and waste recycle from non-operational sites. Both of those have seen an improvement in the last year, and the activity around them to support where it's staff, for instance, to recycle, etc., is ongoing. So we've seen some positive results in those indicators. Very slight decline on that last indicator on waste, about percentage of staff saying who say LCC is doing enough to reduce its environmental impact, from 93 to 91%, just a slight decline. In terms of carbon emissions, we have seen a performance across an improvement across those indicators, and total CO2 emissions from our operations, we've gone from 13,000 to 11.5, just over 11,500 tonnes. And same with the carbon emissions from our own buildings. Again, that indicator is moving in the right direction, and some really good traction being made there. On to the last page. Street lighting, CO2 emissions, we're continuing to see reductions there due to electricity sources, and as well as continuing to what we call trim and dim, so basically squeezing out more efficiencies. Business miles claimed, very static, that one, that indicator. We are carrying out a green fleet review, and we will look at what more we can do, if anything, in terms of business miles around that work, to see if we can get more traction on that one. Renewable energy generated a percent of consumption. We've seen an improvement in performance there as well, 12 to 16%. And the last one, CO2 emissions per capita. That is a national figure, 2 years in arrears. But again, it's going in the right direction. A small change, but it is moving in the right direction. Overall, I think generally you can say that we've had strong performance across the highways and transport indicators. And although public satisfaction has declined, comparative performance against other authorities is well above average. On the environment and waste side, we have had good performance, as you can see, on the emissions reductions, although our waste indicators do tend to be below average, although we do expect improvement on a number of those from 2020 onwards. So just as a kind of summary snapshot there. Final thing I would say, Appendix B of the report is the Environment and Transport section of the Council's annual performance report. And apologies if members have seen this through the Scrutiny Commission, because I know it goes through all that process as well. So it may be familiar to you. I hope you find it informative and useful, and it gives you a wide view of the range of activities we carry out within the department. I don't propose to go through it. I am more than happy to take questions from you. The only thing I would add is, because obviously we give you the range of large schemes that we're working on. Just this week we have heard we've been successful in the Housing Infrastructure Funding bid for Melton South, and we've secured a further 14.7 million towards that scheme for Melton South. So that's just additional news to what's in this appendix for you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. It's very detailed. Over to Bill.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's an interesting report, and one has to read between the lines as well for what's here, and compare this committee with what's reported in other committees. And I note from the Corporate Governance Committee that in September 2018, money was granted for a reuse facility at our waste transfer stations. It's over a year ago. To the best of my knowledge, I'm looking at Joanne, I keep harping about this, I can't say anything's happened in a year about reuse at our tips. We talked about some time ago about taking goods out to sell on or use to various charities. A year on, nothing seems to have happened. So can you please tell us what's happening about that? On page 44, if you remember, just for the last election, the leader went ahead and put some speed cameras up in various locations in the county, with the understanding that he was going to get the money back from central government to fund the next lot. Well, we're talking about the next lot, and we haven't got the money for the first lot yet. So I just wondered where we're going with that. We keep being told he's talking to ministers about the money, but nothing seems to be flowing back. So I'm a bit concerned that we don't seem to make any progress in that regard. We may have made some fines. I don't know what total number of fines we are, but hope we have anyway. And on page 47, there's a nail to hang my coat on, and I'm sure other members will agree. Grass cutting at the bottom, important function, agreed, but I'm still having problems with parking on grass verges. And the county council won't take any action on people parking on grass verges. Now, they dig the grass verges up with the tyres and everything else, makes it more difficult to cut. I can't understand why we can't take action against people who park on grass verges, damaging county council property.
Yes.
This has gone as far as our monitoring officer, who said it's not expedient to prosecute people. Well, with respect, unless we make a start on this, we'll have no grass verges left. They'll all be chewed up like a ploughed field. And so I really do think we ought to take the bull by the horns, and in some districts, any district if you like, do a scheme of knocking people on the window and who are parking on grass verges causing problems. There's no need for it. It just damages everything and just spoils the whole area. I think I better leave it there, Chair, before I get carried away.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you.
Yeah, there's just a few things, but it's a good report. However, you know, it's an opportunity to hang some things on, and I've hung my coat on some.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to go to you first, Joe? You can answer the first one. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, if I just pick up the reuse, you're absolutely right. We have a project that's ongoing that has 3 elements to it, and we've brought information back through this committee in the past. It has 3 parts. One is to insource the last recycling house or waste site at Whetstone, which we have served notice on that contractor and will come in next October. The other includes the public consultation that we did about possible changes to the hours through the summer period, which has now closed in September, and we're reviewing that with a view to take a report back to Cabinet. And you're absolutely right, the 3rd element was linked to growing the reuse activities at the existing recycling house or waste site. It's something that we haven't debated at agenda planning, but I would propose that we do in terms of when it is best to bring you a more detailed report on what we're doing on reuse, because I know it's been asked for. And that's a timing thing. If I could just tell you some of the things that we are doing. We have recruited a member of staff who doesn't actually start till next week, who will do extensive training of our nearly 90 operatives that work on the site, because we have to support them to support the 1.5 million visitors that come to our sites with broken material that if they had brought it intact arguably could have been for reuse, but they don't think to visit our facilities for that purpose. So it's part of a process of educating people over time to think to visit us with material that could be viable for reuse. We are working on that. We've also been making some infrastructure changes to our sites to make covered areas, canopied areas, so that we can retain some of this material and not put it into the big containers that will simply smash the material and then it has no value. We are also in the middle of designing a number of procurements to go out to the market to improve the contracts we currently have for reuse, and the intention was that we would grow that whole new business over the next 6 years. It will take us that long, but there will be midpoint reviews to review things like whether we move on to things like reuse shops, reuse auctions, but you have to create a critical mass before you move to those next stages. All I would suggest is it's something that through you, Chair, we'll bring back to agenda planning, because at the moment that is what we are doing. But to present you with that report, I would argue that what you should task me with as an officer is do some work in the next 18 months and then bring back a progress report and challenge what we're doing. I need to get some traction on the performance improvements, which will include communications and all of the things I've mentioned. However, that's something that absolutely we can debate and bring something back specifically on the reuse. But I would just assure that we are doing things behind the scenes.
Okay, thanks, Joe. What I suggest is, Bill, with this, we'll put it through to David and we'll bring it up at the next briefing. Are you all right with that, David? We seem to the briefing meetings are excellent to put these things on the agenda. Are you happy with that, Bill? With that first point?
Yes, Chair, but, you know, we granted the money a year ago, and a year on, well, until this afternoon, we haven't made any progress. So, you know, I'd like something sooner rather than later, so a task
I
I'm
understand.
working on.
But,
Yeah.
but you know, isn't it good that you can scrutinise it? You've brought it up and now we're going to address it.
I brought it up
But
two or
we
three
still-
meetings ago as well.
But it's good. But we're on to it now. So I think if David could sort of get your points and bring it to the briefing, that'll be fine.
We should do, Chairman, is invite that young lady who's on the television who stands outside the tips and collects the... what a delightful programme that is, where stuff is thrown away and she turns it into profit by making all kinds of artefacts. But I mean, seriously, there are a number of groups that I know of that actually do take... they revitalise furniture and artefacts, and I think we could... I think there's a real market there, isn't there? A real potential, which I'd like to see. Could I just say something about this report generally? And that is, it really does, Appendix P really does give us such a comprehensive overview of everything that's happening and the aspirations that we all would like to see happening, that I think we should give these reports the widest possible circulation, because I think it actually shows the County Council up in a positive light, and I think if people could see the constructive work that carries on coming out of County Hall, I think it would help. It would help the reputation of all of us to a considerable degree.
Thank you, David. I do think, if I'm correct, Blake, this report, it's public knowledge. All members here can pass it through and through the districts if you're double-hatted. And I think we should do that because it is a good report, and I appreciate that, David.
So, indeed, Chairman, there were three questions asked by Bill. One was obviously about reuse, the other was about average speed cameras, and the other was about enforcement on verges. But I just want to wrap up a number of points that have been made. Indeed, the Appendix B to this report will form part of our annual compendium, which actually goes through full council, and I totally concur. It's just indicative and evidence of how hard the department's working on a number of fronts. We talk about specific issues at any one E&T scrutiny meeting. There is so much happening within the department which ranges over a broad spectrum of areas that I think we all need to be supportive and commend the work that the officers do. It's fantastic work. In terms of the reuse, I just want to pick up and give my assurances that although I wasn't aware there was a specific budget, growth budget, that we asked for and was accepted within last year's budgets, I can assure the committee that part of, if you like, the proposals to reform and try and find efficiency savings within the department included £300,000 this year of savings. £200,000 of that was going to come through initiatives through reuse, and I can totally assure members here that we're full foot on the throttle in that respect. It's really important that we explore how we can recycle and reuse materials at the waste and recycling sites. But of course, there's a lead time. We have to grow a market. Joe's just spoken about the critical mass that needs to be built up to be able to find the market. And then there's obviously infrastructure and processes that need to be put in place this side. So all of that work is being done by the department at the moment. We will respond to the consultation on the opening hours. That's now closed, and I've been briefed on the initial outturn of that consultation. We need to look very closely at what that consultation's telling us. But now I'll move on to average speed cameras, because you're absolutely right. It was an initiative by this authority to roll out and pilot the average speed cameras. And yes, we haven't been successful in getting government to fund the initiative here in Leicestershire, but we have put hard-earned cash here at County Hall behind the scheme. It's something that the public largely said they wanted to see happen. They wanted the County Council to play more of a role in trying to tackle community concerns around speeding in their communities, and this was our answer to that, and we know it's popular. There are issues in that we haven't had much traction or success with the Department for Transport and probably the Treasury, more specifically, in terms of being able to get them to alter the rules whereby we are able to keep and reinvest an element of the penalty, the fines arising out of speeding motorists. But it's something that we are looking towards next year to see how we can, harness the scheme and maybe, explore how we can make the scheme work for a greater benefit of more communities out there in Leicestershire. We haven't got all the answers yet, but that work's taking place as we speak. Just before I pass over to Anne to deal with the enforcement issue, it's probably worth noting there was a small article in the Times where I note the boroughs in London are lobbying the government to get more powers from the government in terms of traffic enforcement, particularly around speeding. The argument being it's only the police at the moment that can enforce speeding unless you've got some camera initiative that we've managed to pilot here in Leicestershire. Those powers don't exist at local authority level at the moment, and no doubt when Anne responds to the issue about enforcement on verges, we'll be exploring perhaps how local authorities can garner those powers to probably take more of engagement in enforcing speeding and motoring issues locally, because we know they're of concern to our community and the people we represent out there, and I think it's right actually that we explore how we can help out in that respect.
Thank you, Blake, for that. Anne.
Sorry, taking the matter of parking on verges. Just firstly, in terms of parking on verges, it's perfectly legal for anybody to park on a verge if there's no parking restrictions or they're not causing any obstruction or safety issue. So people can park on verges subject to those criteria. Where they then damage the verge, it is very, very difficult in many scenarios to prove who has actually done that for us to take any action. There may be some exceptions to that, but in a lot of cases it's not easy to find and have definitive evidence that would go through and be strong enough for us to take definitive action to then enforce that against an individual. In terms of repairing them, because we are often in the position where communities would like to see us, because for the very reasons you say, aesthetics, etc., like to see us repair them. Actually, it's very, very challenging. In an ideal world, we'd love to have the money to be able to repair that, because as we know, in the winter seasons, etc., when we've had as much rain as we have, it doesn't take a lot to damage a grass verge. Unfortunately, we're not in that position, and we're not in the position in many cases that some communities would like us to hard surface those verges going forward. We are very much about maintaining the asset as it is and then trying to deal with those safety defects. So it's not an easy one, and it does take considerable resource in terms of taking through the courts to actually get a successful enforcement of that. In terms of the moving traffic offences that Blake was mentioning, he's absolutely right. It's something that local authorities have been seeking powers for quite a long time. And equally, just recently, there's been some articles in the media where the DFT appear to be reconsidering that, if there could be the possibility of local authorities enforcing some of those moving traffic offences, which at the moment we require a police officer to be present in order to do, and causes frustration all round, because unfortunately, we can't get the resourcing where the communities would like to see that. So who knows, it might be a note of optimism there coming from government in terms of us being able to do something more proactive in those areas.
Thank you. And just before we move on to Dan and then Janice, an issue that I come across on a regular basis is that, and I'm sure Bill is aware of this, that we've got suburbs that weren't built for houses to have 3 cars, 4 cars. Unfortunately, there's a number of houses with so many cars on that just nowhere to put them. They and to be honest, if they don't park sometimes on the verge, they'll block the road. It's that bad. So I don't know what we do. There's that many vehicles, and it's just the way it is. We've got old suburbs with cars that we never really would have experienced years ago. Over to Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to really welcome the report. It's really well laid out. To be able to sit and read it in a nice steady flow, and the figures and the information is first class, so I'd like to thank the officers for that. I'd like to try and help Bill if I could, because on page 44 of Appendix B, It's very explicit, and this is why really, if we could operate our cameras, it's according to this, there's just under 10,000 people have been fined. You could imagine if we were operating our systems and we invested our $500,000, but we would start to see a substantial return on that. So it is about how we go forward, I think, Mr. Chairman, in all of this. You know, we've got to be able to fund things to go forward, but we all know as members, one of the big problems, and particularly with my villages, is it's speed. Wherever we go, where every parish council I attend, it's always speed is the big villain. And it's not easy to be able to say, well, we have a solution. Well, we've got a potential solution here. But they won't allow us to have the money back, not to make a profit, but give us our investment so we can roll it on somewhere else, which would have been an amazing progress for us. But that's beyond our pay grade, as they say. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Excellent point, Dan. I think we all agree with your comments there. Can we go on to Janice, and then we've got Brenda, and then back to Bill. Is that okay, Bill?
Thank you, Chairman. Okay. Thank you. I'd like to thank the officers for a real detailed report. My view on the strategic plan for highway is working well. I had a highway issue a little while ago that was dealt with extremely well, and I even had the resident call me to ask me to pass on the thanks to the workforce and to the highway officers who attended and carried out the work. So I thought it's nice to pass on a compliment, because I'm sure you must have so many grumbles. So it's nice to be able to sit here and actually say things are working well. So I'd like to thank the office for that.
And thanks for mentioning strategically, because we're all here to get the big plan so it works for everybody, and I think that's what we're trying to achieve. So I really appreciate it. I'm sure the officers appreciate those comments. Brenda, over to you.
I also watch that programme, and when they say how much those things are valued at, I'm always saying, really? Yeah. No, I just wonder. No. But I couldn't miss this opportunity, and I'm sure that you already know what I'm going to say about the grass verges, so I'm supporting you on there. We've only got 3 streets in Thermston that have got the grass verges in, and you're right, houses on those 3 streets are ex-council houses, and when they were built they had lovely front gardens. The front gardens are now driveways, so they don't have to park on the road, they park in their driveway, and the majority of them can get 2, some of them can get 3 cars on the driveway, so they're not parking on the road. But unfortunately, they have to go over the grass verge to do it. And we've had some patching on our path, on these roads as well. And they've patched the path lovely and gone right round the grass verge, probably making life more difficult because they're having to miss the grass verge to replace it with tarmac. But the problem's always going to be there. Always. We could be here in 20 years, 30, 40 years' time, and it's always going to be there. Surely we should be starting a scheme, even if it's, doing 1 street per year or something like that, and looking at it more in depth. When a path has to be resurfaced, because of safety reasons, we ought to be looking at a bigger picture here. If we want those cars off the roads and not parked half on and half off the path, we need to address the fact that houses can't do that, because they do have to drive over the verge to get into their driveway. Because they've widened it. So I would like, and I understand about the money, and it's so easy and glib for me to say this, but surely we could just start a scheme of, when they come to inspect the paths, just look at the bigger picture and seeing whether aesthetically you could do something that would improve the area. So that's my soapbox.
Well,
got
can
off.
can I suggest, Anne, that again, it wasn't raised by, and Bill's back, and then we'll, to Bill, that we bring it up and we bring it onto the agenda. It may be a point that we can discuss at briefing. Blake, is that all right again, Bill? Would you follow that through with David?
Yes, I'm quite happy to that, but I can't believe there's nothing anybody can do about people parking fully on a grass verge. I'm not talking about two wheels on. People deliberately just park on the grass verge. I've got, in one particular area, a chap with a van, lives across the road. He won't park the van outside his house. He comes and parks on the grass verge across the road. He's got room to park in his own drive, but he changed the drive on the grass verge. And it just churns it up. It looks so bad. And while I'm on the same little subject, with your tolerance, Chair, 'cause you know I'm a very easygoing person and moderate. How about these vehicles who park on a corner, on the pavement, on a corner? If you ring the police to say it's not obstruction, because you can get by, but you cannot see to turn out of the roads. Sure, that's a highway issue. If you're blocking somebody's view, is that still down to the police? Because they say it's a highway issue, nothing to do with them.
Anne, any comments, and then we'll move on.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, in that last one, that's contrary to the Highway Code. That is a police matter. If it's parked, somebody is parked right on a corner of a junction. Sorry, can I just go back to it covers both Mrs. Seaton and Mr. Bolter's points there. Firstly, the first point I would say, whenever we're doing a scheme, we'll always look at if there's anything else we can incorporate and include in that, etc., without including and increasing the scope of that scheme. Fundamentally, and just to give you the context, while it would be ideal to be able to, we're out there, we're doing safety works to footpaths, etc., to roads, we can do A, B and C additional. And for instance, I would say in the last year I've had 3 separate requests about can we just, because of just the nature, the housing was built decades ago and it didn't have off-road car parking, or that kind of scenario you're discussing, could we just hard pave it, etc. Those schemes in themselves, I reckon, would easily cost in the hundreds of thousands, those 3 schemes that have been asked for in the last year. If I could just bring you back to, the item where we talked about our state of our unclassified roads here have gone from 12% requiring structural maintenance to 15%. And again, just another thing to give you a wee bit more about the context there. It's 2 years since we've done any kind of capital maintenance to footways. All we do now is safety schemes. So unfortunately, while I can absolutely understand the logic of why, and those cars will always be there, and why the residents would want that hard paved, unfortunately, our priority must be the key works to maintain the asset and deal with the safety, not unfortunately the improvements and the upgradings that we would all like to see. I'd love to be able to do them, but the harsh reality is our network's deteriorating. We have to focus on the safety things, and unfortunately, we haven't got the resource to do that at this point in time, which is a similar point that comes back to the enforcement on the verges, because again, we have to weigh up what's the risk and the safety issue to do with the officer resource of enforcing something, etc. And at the moment, that balance isn't right for us at the moment. So therefore, unless it's a safety issue, chances are we will not be enforcing on verges or repairing glass verges, because unfortunately, we just don't have the means to do it with our current funding constraints.
You want to say something, Bill?
Yes, it's interesting how we can enforce people with overgrown hedges, but we can't enforce the people parking on grass verges.
That is a later process.
So, Brenda, and then we'll go to...
Thank you for that. And I already knew the answer to that, because obviously I've had it sent to me quite often, and they must think, oh God, it's her again, bout of urge. No, I know, but I've not long paid for my son to have a dropped curb. I thought I'd better do it properly because I was a councillor. I was very tempted not to, because it's quite expensive to get planning permission for a dropped curb. Actually, he doesn't live in that house now, he's moved, and you think, really? I know. But could house owners do that to their own grass verge? Could they hard surface it with no getting into no trouble whatsoever? Could they do that, or are you going to say no, they can't, but turn a blind eye to it if they do?
As you know, we've had conversations with many councillors over many years, and we always like it when you come back to us on the same things. We always try. We're always, because with the budget constraints, trying to help people facilitate themselves as well. Obviously, we can't condone someone just going out with a few bags of tarmac from B&Q and other stores are available to start tarmacking the verge, because you have statutory undertaker equipment in there, there are electric supplies, you can't do that. So there is a permitting system that we'd ask people to go through to help them with it. Or they could all get together and ask to pay for us to do it, or bring in another contractor who's licensed to do that. But someone with their own shovel and a bag of tarmac, definitely not, because I wouldn't want them to risk digging into a cable or something else that's in there. So, but if people want to get together and look at how they can fund a scheme, or other organisations could, we're always trying to see how we can facilitate that.
Just quite interested, before we go to Blake, we actually got a group together we're in my district, and then when to do that, they all agreed to pay. When they saw the bill, they didn't want to pay. So it was a lot more than we expected. And again, I think the important issue there, we did start discovering utilities under the ground that needed access. So you couldn't put tarmac, and there was some particular danger. Blake.
Thank you, Chairman. And I thought that was quite a witty comment you made about the funding of enforcement through the hedge funds. But in all seriousness, I don't think Anne got to finish the point. If you logic this through, a hedge that's overgrows, you can see it stays there. A car that's parked in a dangerous position could be there and then gone, and it's very difficult to pinpoint who's responsible. And my understanding is, whilst we will send out enforcement notices, we've never, if you like, had to go through the legal processes to enforce. It tends to, act as a bit of a stick, and the owners of those hedges tend to, take the action that is necessary and should be taken. Having said that, can I just say how pleased I am to hear some of the complimentary comments that have been made, particularly by yourself, Jackie, and other members, because, I always say, Janice, my apologies. I always say the Environment and Transport Department is one of the most front-facing departments of this county council. It doesn't necessarily spend the most amount of money, but everyone sees the work of the department, and everyone tends to have an opinion on the work. And you're quite right. I received quite a few emails of complaint and criticism, but by and large, within the resource envelope the department works to, they do a fantastic job. Now, we've just had a little bit of a debate about Brenda's issue, and I agree. Brenda's frustrated with the bluntness of some of the current policies, which, if you like, have been put in place to deal with the austerity that we've had to deal with for the last 8 years. And I think it will come as a little surprise to everyone that the department, in some ways, has had to take some of the lion's share of the spending cuts. Other departments where, there is real life and death at stake have had to be supported. And we all know about some of the major pressures on the department in terms of special educational needs transport. So far this year, that is overspending by 1.6 million, which amounts to pretty much all of the overspend. There'll be the outturn at the end of the year, but we're having to fund transport at the sacrifice of other schemes. Those great pressures. That said, we're acutely aware that communities out there, and Brenda is absolutely right, they want us to start to look in a different way how we can use the resource and deal with these issues. So I'm working really hard with the management of the department behind the scenes to try and prepare budget proposals that will actually get to the heart of dealing with the functions of the department, if you like, in a bit more lateral way. Obviously, we're not going to have endless bottomless resources to solve every problem, but I do think now, with the recognition of austerities coming to an end, and there's perhaps the opportunity to see a little bit more money from central government, we can have discussion as well internally as where our priorities lay, and start to look at some of the functions and how we can go about funding maybe some of the additionality that members would like to see in their divisions, and we're working on those proposals at the moment. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, Brenda. Yeah, of course you can.
Sorry. I just want to also be confident that we have learnt then by our past mistakes that developments aren't being developed with grass verges. Because if they do, I mean, it looks beautiful, and from the developers, pictures-wise, it'll look grand and fantastic, but you're always going to get cars parking on those grass verges. So I was saying that my grass verges will still be a mess 20, 30 years' time, but so will the grass verges of the 4,500 houses that we're going to have in Thurmaston will also probably look a mess in 50, 60 years' time. So you'll have another person like me sitting here banging on about grass verges. So I'm just hoping that we do learn by our own mistakes. Probably put a grass verge a little bit further back and have tarmac at the front for 2 weeks. I don't know. Thank you.
Well, I think that's a good point, and I'm sure Anne. But can I also just say it was refreshing that Anne's just turned around over a 5-minute period and said, well, actually, we ain't got the money. That's the deal. And that is how transparent this committee is, and we really appreciate your forwardness there, Anne, because we've got to juggle things, and it's really appreciated by everybody that you give us the information as it is, and thank you very much for that.
As much as I'd love to say that, Max, we're working really hard to see how we can use our monies in a different way in the future.
Max likes to spend money. He'd spend it on everybody.
Can I just, as a point of order, Chair?
Yes.
There are devices now one can put on the grass verge that the grass actually grows through. I'm not talking about the concrete, I'm talking about the plastic grids and the mesh that you put down. It will take the weight of a vehicle, not a lorry, but the weight of a vehicle, and that could be part of the planning process. If you're going to have a grass verge, that's put down, so we're building things out over a period of time.
Can I say, before we go on to that, we've had some of that in Melton and they don't work very well. They look up, you still squash them, seriously. And now I've seen it, they still look messy, and I think we can move on, but I think we need to look at other options. Next agenda item, thank you. Go on to number 11, a review of the, just to let everybody know, this is Pat's first presentation. So the cameras are on you, so there's no sweat, okay? So over to Pat.
Thank you, Chair. The report I bring today is, the purpose of the report is to advise members of the Environment and Transport Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the annual performance of our gully cleansing operation. Leicestershire County Council maintain its highway asset in conjunction with our highway asset management policy. As part of the policy, we have an highway asset infrastructure management plan, HAMP. It has been developed prescribing how we will maintain our asset on a risk-based approach. Historically, all our gullies were visited on a cyclic schedule. Full gullies were maintained the same as half-filled gullies or empty gullies, resulting in an inefficient process and prolonged periods of time between cleanses. Following a report brought to scrutiny this time last year, the authority began to implement a risk-based approach to gully emptying in line with the new HAMP. The principles of which are to clean the gullies when the gullies need cleaning and collect data whilst we're there. Gullies are now categorised into one of the following programmes depending on the location and the historic data held on that gully. P1 roads are cleaned every 10 months, P2 roads are cleaned every 20 months, and P3 gullies are inspected every 24 months. The teams have also split into cyclic crews and reactive crews, so that there is a dedicated resource on each discipline, enabling an approach that is focused to delivering the service. Along with this, we have also implemented a new gully emptying data system to provide increased intelligence into the gully asset that we have. Our current position. From April 2019, we have engaged a new supply chain partner to support in the delivery of our cyclic cleanse. LCC crews are now concentrating on the delivery of the reactive response service. All the gullies in the county, the 136,000 assets we have now been mapped and categorised correctly. New KPIs have been introduced to measure performance and incentivise good performance and best practice as outlined in point 10 and 11 of your report. Over the past 6 months, we have visited 40,719 gullies with our gully cleansing units and inspected 13,114. In total, we have visited 53,833 gullies, a very good performance in a half a year. In Table 3, you will see indicated previous year's performance. We are well on track to deliver our target for this year, which will be over 90,000 gullies. At this moment, this is a more targeted approach that saves time, money, and improves the service we are delivering in Leicestershire. It is our plan to have the 136,000 gullies all covered by the new monitoring system by this time next year.
Thank you. Before going to Brenda, everybody, we discussed in briefing. What thanks about that was very well done. I'll give you marks out of 10 later on. But well done. But seriously, we've got an ageing system. Some of us know some of the major draining systems that go back to Victorian times. We've got a growing population, and to be truthful, if it's full, it's full. You can only do so much. Gullies is part of it, but we are aware we've got a system that needs a total review, the whole of the country in the future. But I've personally experienced that we did something recently. The response was excellent, and I've had some positive feedback from residents in regard to the work you've done. Brenda.
Thank you, Chair. I also have an ageing system, but that's to be discussed at a later date. Aside from a completely disastrous August for the Water Authority in Thermiston, and after it blew up several road systems, and that was all dealt with, I can't praise the work that's been done on the gullies enough in Thermiston. Humberston Lane Junction, I had to ring up quite regularly and get somebody out to clear the drains out. That does not flood anymore. The work's been done on that. Churchill Bridge, we've had the fencing moved back so we don't have to get in touch with Network Rail every time we want to go on that, and it is on a now regular service. So although the bridge floods, and it will always flood because of where it is and how deep the road is, it now drains away really well. And the other one is Melton Road from Thermiston Roundabout, where the new junction was done with Costco. There was some problem with the gullies there as well. And it's also outside my house. So we don't get that river running down anymore. So I have nothing, because the last one I felt guilty, especially when you said about the pressures of the funding going somewhere else. And there's me banging on about grass verges. So I think it's excellent that it's been done and that it's all been mapped and planned now. So thank you.
Thanks, Brenda. It's funny because I do that road from Leicester a lot, and that water outside near Costco, it was there for years, wasn't it? Yeah, well done. Over to Bill.
Yes, gully cleaning, one of my favourite subjects, as Ian will say. Yes, I was going to ask about the new service we've got, where they privatise half the service and keeping half in-house. I couldn't really see the point in it at the time, because the privatised service, I understand, just cleans the gullies out. If there's any problem, they move on to the next one, and we have to go and do the work completely. So I can't see the benefit in that, because we could have done that ourselves. But anyway, I don't know what the cost in that is, but no doubt that'll come out at a later date, because I'll be asking for that. So look out, Pat. But things concern me. I mean, in my local area, I can only talk about my local area, Wakes Road Island. Today, flooding. It's been attended to lots of times, still floods. And it's causing a traffic hazard because people see this big pool of water 3/4 way across the carriageway. Some brave souls try and go through it and get stuck. Others suddenly pull out because, problems with other people coming at the side of them. And another way, in Viking Road, it's been a problem now for 3 years, 4 years. Yeah, last week our contractors turned up and dig on out on West Avenue, which is 100 yards away from where the problem is. And I can't quite work out why that bit's never flooded, and the bit that's flooded has been left. And we've got Henry's traffic light problem there now, and traffic held up because of the traffic lights. And last week, in South Wixton, men came along, put traffic lights up. They're there for 3 days, never did any work, then took the traffic lights down again. And I just
Okay, we.
it's the drains.
Well, can I just help you there, Pat, a bit? This was discussed last year, and I know Bill brought it up regarding contractors versus. I think we remember it, and don't we? There was an issue is that they would come and do the basics. Where it was more serious, I think Ian, maybe had done a presentation. I think in the old days when you were the gully man, and and then if I remember right, that we had more serious issues that we would go in and do a more remedial, more complex. But I do feel that there is, Bill. To be honest, I feel there is improvement and we've had. It's not just because who we are and what party I feel, but the structure you're putting in is, I feel, works better for Melton, I've got to say. So any response to the issues there that you can get back to it.
Maybe improvement because the system has changed.
And that's what we're saying. Good on.
The system could have been done with their own workforce without privatising.
I understand that, but I think we've got to at least comment and say, well done. We have changed. We did listen. We are changing the system. Maybe could we, instead of discussing those issues, could we take them on a private thing and discuss them later? Because these are less strategic, more individual, and I think we can concentrate that. So can you have a chat with afterwards? Are you all right with that, Anne, to do that?
Can I just come back on one point? Because I think it was in that original presentation we did about this is what we're proposing to do with gully emptying. So I could just answer that one now, but definitely on the specifics of the schemes you're talking about, if we could do that, afterwards, that would be really helpful. We did test the private sector against our own operations for that just routine gully cleansing, nothing more difficult than that. It was the same one. And actually what we found is they were far more efficient. Now, part of that was because under their terms and conditions, there are certain things that the private sector can do that we as a local authority can't, offering bonuses, etc., etc. So therefore, we are aiming to get the best of both worlds. Previously, we would have done the gully emptying, and where the gully itself, we couldn't unjam the gully, actually we needed more intensive work to go and either get the camera van or a crew out to then start digging up the drainage system back from that gully. Actually, our people would have done that anyway. They are doing that now. So we're getting the best of both worlds now by actually getting the efficiencies that the private sector can offer on that standard operation of gully cleansing, and then we do, as we would have done before anyway, the more detailed work to get to the heart of what's the problem in that network that we can't see underground to fix that option. So hopefully that answers that part of it. On the specific ones about those ones, we'll need to take offline.
Is that okay, Bill? We'll go to Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, no horror stories from me about gullies. All I can say is this is an amazing document. This will go all around my parish councils, from 50,000 to 90,000, and the big leap then up to 136,000. Wow. Because obviously, as a county, I have no idea how many gullies we got. And when I looked at this, your sort of head starts to spin and you think, oh gosh, this is an amazing, amazing document, and I'd like to thank the officers for this, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
And can I say, Dan, you've in briefing with Pat and the staff and all the members here, we felt that we're in the briefing prior that it was a very good document, some good work, and we hopefully it just gets better. Okay, thank you for that. Over to you, Blake.
Yeah, just to conclude, if that's okay, on this gullies. Again, this has been, if you like, 2 years. The first year we did the assessments and trialled, the case. And then we've implemented it this year, and now we're looking at our first set of results. And I really think this is the future for how we should operate services. What we've got is a highway network out there with a huge amount of inventory. It's worth over £5 billion, and we're just in the process now, through this new system, of locating every single gully, assessing assessing what level of silt or debris is in that gully, which will then feed into our maintenance schedules and therefore create efficiencies in terms of how we plan and cost for the maintenance. Moreover, if we can replicate this type of system, especially with the software that sits behind it on other highways, assets and inventory, whether that be signs or indeed pavements, etc., that is definitely the way forward, and I think that's what the department's looking to do. There's a huge amount of work in terms of the digital transformation and not least the investment in the software and the technology needed to operate that system. But Anne and I often talk about this. We'd love to get to a situation in the not too distant future where a member could click on a computer screen, or indeed a member of the public, and see within their division or their area every single asset, when it was last maintained, when it's due to be serviced next. That would be an amazing asset, and hopefully I'll be around to see something like that in place, and it will revolutionise how we cost and approach maintenance of the highway. So thank you to Pat and thank you for the team for bringing this system along. It's really working.
Thank you, Blake. I know there was some suggestion somewhere in regard to some of the drains having rubber covers and this sort of stuff. It was brought up by some member. When you see how many gullies and drains we've got, that would not only be impractical, I think, and I don't think it would work. I think some of the research I've seen, but I know there's all sorts of ideas and suggestions, Blake, that to try and improve things, but we've just got to go to the ones that work. Correct, Anne? Thank you. Can we go on to the next and final agenda item? This is to do with the permit scheme. Can I say I was absolutely blown over when I was told that on a daily basis we have between 50 and 70 new roadworks start a day, on a daily basis throughout the county. Just start adding that over a year, it's bonkers. And so there was a need of a permit scheme, and back to Pat, who's already written down somebody's name on Monday who saw them, who didn't have a permit. That was quite incredible. Over to you, Pat.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to update members of the Environment and Transport Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the annual performance of Leicestershire County Council's permitting for street works and roadworks. The permitting scheme has been developed under the powers of the Traffic Management Act 2004. It was implemented in February 2018 following an approval from the Cabinet, and over the course of 2017 that approval was gained. The aim of the permit scheme is to improve the management of the roadworks on our network, better planning, better scheduling and management of activities that take place. The permitting scheme does not give the County Council the authority to prevent street works or roadworks from being carried out. Works promoters are carrying out their statutory duty to provide and maintain their services, and developers are delivering new housing infrastructure. There are a number of objectives to the permitting scheme outlined in point 10 and 11 of your report. On page 63 is a table outlining the different types of permits, works and timescales that then permits are for. Our performance from February 2018 to the 1st of August 2019, the Department has granted 40,313 permits. This is on average 2,240 permits per month, and as already spoken, that's 50 to 70 roadworks starting on average every day. Figure 4 on page 66 outlines the different categories of permits and the volume of permits we have received. Figure 5 outlines the various traffic management types that are covered under the permitting scheme. Leicestershire County Council manages and administers this scheme, which is undertaken by a small team of 27 people covering the whole county, as outlined in point 25, and their responsibilities are there as well. Under the Traffic Management Act, we are able to recover reasonable costs. The permit schemes are not intended to be a revenue generation. The current financial position of the permit scheme has made a deficit of 13,800. This has also does have an offset of penalty generations of 55,280. At this stage, it is not recommended that we change any of the fees for the permitting scheme after the first year. Can I also encourage members to have a look at the One Network website that informs you of all the roadworks in your area, along with any other flooding issues or issues that may be on the road network.
Thank you, Pat. And you did mention that's a very good you go online, have a look, and it gives you throughout your area, throughout the country. I think it'd be very worthwhile. Any final questions to this report? Can I say I love the graphs, the colour, you see it as you get. I like that. It's very informative. So, Pat, once again, thank you very much for that. Any comments before we move on? Okay.
Don't ask him to.
I love you. No. Okay, well, listen, thank you for the report. Can I just remind everybody, the next is after Christmas, so I wish everybody a happy Christmas. And and congratulations, everybody. It's a very informative committee. Well done. Have a safe journey home. And thank you for your contributions to everybody. Thank you.